Hello, my name is Frank DeLuzio, and welcome back to Frank's Fiction, the book review podcast. I am a big liar. So, I said that last week was going to be the last episode of this season, and I accidentally lied. This show has been a lot of fun to make, and I decided to throw a little bit of a bonus episode because going forward, my decision with the podcast is that when I come back for season two, episodes are going to be released every other week, so it will be a bi weekly podcast. However, I want to also make some bonus episodes that aren't necessarily book reviews, but they're various book related topics. And those episodes will air on weeks that the book reviews wouldn't be airing. If that makes any sense. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. So, for example, if I had a book review posted, the next week would be off. And then the week after that, I would have a book review. So that week in between the two book reviews, I could put a bonus episode right there. Kind of like what I'm sort of doing here a little bit. So for today's episode, I thought just in general, after every season was done, a nice little palate cleanser, a nice little ending to each season could be ranking my least favorite books all the way to my favorite books that I covered on the podcast. I also asked all of you guys who are listening and just people on social media in general, various book recommendations that they had that maybe I can cover on the show. So I'm going to go over those after I do the ranking. And I just want to give a warning that there were so many book recommendations. I'm not going to be naming all of them, but I did write down a good amount. And the ones that I wrote down sound really, really good, honestly. All right, so we're just going to go right into this book ranking. This style of episode might be a little bit different than the typical reviews. It's not going to be as structured, but hey, I just want to thank all of you for tuning in. Oh, and before I forget, you can follow me on TikTok and Instagram at franks_fiction. My email should also be shown there, franksfiction@yahoo.com. All right, now that we got that over with, let's start with my least favorite book that I covered for season one. It probably will not be any surprise whatsoever, but I have to go with In a Dark, Dark Wood by Ruth Ware. So with this season, this was the only book that I rated 3 stars, and I think for good reason, which, by the way, my star ratings are opinion-based mostly. I don't like to be wrong, okay? But to be honest, it was really challenging to make this list in general because 3 of the 5 books, so I almost forgot to mention that Verity. So the Verity episode was made last October. However, I'm going to include it with the season one ranking because that was a 5-star read as well. There were 3 5-star reads out of the 5 books here. So trying to come up with the top 3, even the top 4, honestly, because I was even questioning the 4-star read, whether I should put that above another book or not. This list was difficult to make. However, my least favorite was not difficult to choose whatsoever. I'm also going to try my best not to have any spoilers in this episode because I want this just to be a fun episode where maybe you've been listening to the episodes, or at least maybe you've been listening to the spoiler free parts of the episodes and you still want to read some of these books. I don't want to ruin any spoilers if you haven't read these books yet and you really wanted to. I want this to just be a fun little guide for kind of the order of how, if I were to see all these books at the store, which book would I get first, which book would I get second, which would I get third, and so on. So I'm going to go over the likes and dislikes that I had for each book. So In a Dark, Dark Wood, the things that I liked. The silence was loud. No, I did like things. I'm trying to think. I did like how Ruth Ware wrote the point of view. I thought that was, I remember it being a dream state sort of mind with that, and it made the reader feel confused and foggy a little bit. So I did enjoy that aspect. I'm really trying to think of other things that I liked about it. There was just parts of it that really disappointed me, and those are overshadowing anything good that I liked about it, unfortunately. Oh, I could say one thing that I also liked. So when I was reading the beginning of the book, it actually made me excited to keep reading the book. I thought it had a good beginning hook to it, and I don't think I even mentioned that in the episode. But I thought that was good. I thought the relationship between the protagonist and another character in the book I thought was done fairly well. I just wish it was developed more than it was. Some things that I disliked about the book: the ending. The ending was horrible, just really bad. The more I think about it, I maybe should have even rated this book lower. I was almost thinking maybe I was too nice with the rating, but the ending was just wow. Also, the characters, could not stand them. Not even could I not stand them, I didn't care about them, which I think is even worse, because I think the point of characters is the author wants to create characters that you either are rooting for or that you're booing against. So when you have a character that's kind of like flatlining, that's not good. I don't feel like that's good character development. I honestly didn't really see a ton of development in any of the characters. And if any character should have character development, it should be your protagonist. And even thinking back, I don't think much changed with her. Maybe she moved on from someone and that was like the most that happened, but I didn't really see much growth there as a person. And holy crap, did people make the dumbest choices. And I know in movies and books, sometimes it's just a thing to kind of move the plot forward and to create conflict. But there was so many conflicts that could have been avoided or just, yeah. I think the concept was good. Okay, I'm kind of going back to the likes. The concept of the story of being like this bachelorette party, I thought that was interesting. I just remember being really excited to actually read this book and pick it up. And I had heard some good things about it. So I'm kind of peeved by all the people that recommended this book because I don't know what they saw in it, but it was not doing it for me. All right, so now we're going to go on to number 4. And this was a little tricky, and I hope people aren't too mad that I picked this for the number 4 book on my least favorite to most favorite, but I have to go with The Soulmate by Sally Hepworth. So this was the latest episode, and I did give this a 4 stars. I actually originally gave it a 3.5, and I was rounding it down to 3, but now I actually round this book up to 4 stars. The conversation I had with Chelsea last week was a really insightful one, and she actually helped me like the book a little bit more. And I think I helped her show some of the absurdities of the book at the same time. It was almost like two people who had different views on something, and they kind of came to like a middle ground. So the things that I liked about The Soulmate, I don't want to sound superficial, but I cannot get over the book cover of this book. It's so beautiful. Maybe just because I love the beach and like the water and the ocean. It's such a beautiful cover. Out of all of the covers, like if I was at a store with all these books and I was solely grabbing a book from the cover, this book would have been the first one that I would have grabbed instantly. So whoever the cover designer was for this book, for The Soulmate, great job. Another thing that I liked about the book, I liked their take on mental health. I liked that it wasn't framed as like a weapon or as a negative concept. I just remember reading other books where there'd be certain mental health disorders that were sort of used as a plot device, like, oh, this person was the bad guy because of having this mental health disorder. And I don't think mental health disorders, or I guess what I'm trying to say is that I don't think someone is evil or a bad guy for having a mental health disorder that they did not choose to have. So I liked that they weren't insensitive about that topic. I liked that there were some distinct characters in the book and that they definitely had clear personalities. And I guess overall, I kind of liked the message and the theme of the book. Some things that I disliked. This is actually a little bit trickier to think of some things that I disliked. I think some of the realism behind it was a little not believable. For example, this whole concept with the cliff being behind their house. I was really confused by why a family, especially a family with kids, would even move into this house. I was also really confused about why the town or police or anything or the mayor or whoever was running this town wasn't really doing anything about that. I don't want to give anything away specifically either, but there were a couple scenes didn't really seem that realistic either, or I felt, oh, like wouldn't someone have caught said person if they saw them doing that? And it kind of took me out a little bit. Oh, another thing to add what I liked about the story, once I hit a certain point in the book, I did not want to put it down. That is a common pattern with probably this book and the other three, is they all get to a point in the story where I did not want to put that book down by any means. I guess it's also important to remember that all five of these books are thriller books, and thriller books are supposed to have that sort of that sense of urgency. I don't think the twists in the book were bad. I felt like some of the twists had more potential, though. There were some ideas I was conjuring up that I felt like could have been really interesting to dig into, and then it just tended to be almost a little bit of a lukewarm twist. But don't worry, there definitely is at least a twist or two that were executed well, and they were exciting. So I'm going to go ahead with book number three. So choosing book number three and book number two was actually, so to be honest, choosing book number one wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. But oh my God, trying to pick which one was two and which one was three, that was the hardest decision out of all of them, because those two books I felt like did a great job at what they were supposed to do. But I had to think to myself, which one did it better? There was just a lot of things that I had to consider, because I'm thinking about the entertainment of the book. I'm thinking about the characters. I'm thinking about the plot. Oh, by the way, to add to the soulmate, one thing that I didn't like was it was kind of difficult to be rooting for any character in that book. There might be one character that I think you could sort of root for, and then you think about the outcome of that character and you think, "Oh, that's unfortunate." So, my number 3 book, I'm going to have to go with Verity by Colleen Hoover. So this was episode 1. This was done a while ago with my friend Shayna. I almost made this episode 2 solely for the reason that the amount of discussion you can have on this book is incredible. It's immaculate. This is the next Team Edward versus Team Jacob. You have Team Manuscript versus Team Letter. There are people still arguing about this debate to this day. I remember this was one of the books that I read last year that truly got me back into reading a lot of books again. Especially one big twist towards the end, my mouth dropped. So before I say what I liked and what I disliked about the book, I want to go over why I ultimately decided to make it number 3 instead of number 2. There was 2 main reasons that I could think of. One, the writing style, it's not the most articulate, it's not the most artistic. It is a little, I don't want to say, because I'm not trying to badmouth it, because this was a 5-star read for me, but the language, how do I put it? It's a little more basic. And I'm not trying to insult that at all. I think it still works well, and it's the type of language I would still read in a book, but it's not the most transformative writing style either, if that makes any sense. Another reason I put it number 3, which hopefully too many people don't have an issue with me on this, is Colleen Hoover's controversy. So there's one big controversy with her, and I'm just going to give a warning now. I'm currently doing a buddy read. It's ironic. I just realized, ironically, the buddy read that I did for Verity, my friend Shayna, is the same person. I'm also reading another Colleen Hoover book with her to hopefully have for season 2. And we have another discussion, and we'll probably have another conversation about this. But there's a controversy around her because a lot of people feel like that she romanticizes domestic abuse. And the more that I thought about it, so I had only read Verity so far. I haven't read her other ones. I just started reading November 9. I'll just say it now. Surprise. But the more that I thought about Verity, there were aspects in the book where I could see where people were coming from. I also don't know if this is 100% true or not. So I'm not saying this is fact. This is what I heard through the grapevine. Supposedly, her son sexually assaulted or had some sort of domestic abuse case with a woman. I don't know if that's true. I'm just saying that that might not be true, but that is what I heard, and that was another thing people were having a problem with, because that would really be messed up if her son was guilty of that. So before people bash me for potentially covering a Colleen Hoover book in the future, I just want to say this. I have not bought any of her new books as of lately. I did buy a lot of her books before I knew about this controversy, and I don't know if I want to just toss them necessarily. And November 9 was one of those books that a lot of people did tell me was one of her good ones. So there's a 90% chance that that Colleen Hoover book will be covered on the podcast. I don't want people to think that I'm not taking that issue seriously or anything. It's just at the same time, I already have the books purchased, and I was going to try my best to cover all of the books that I own. We will see if I do cover any more in the future. We will see about that. I kind of want to keep my eye on her a little bit. So, some things that I liked about Verity: very fast pace. This was a book, so I can just say it now for this book and the other two books. On average, so not counting these books, on average, it typically could take me 1 to 2 weeks to read a book. I've even taken longer. Like In a Dark, Dark Wood, that took me a month to read because I started getting less and less excited as I was going through that book. This book and the other two that I'm going to name took me 3 days to read. I was hooked. And some people will read books in a day or in a few hours, but 3 days is really fast for me, I promise. I think this book, it's not super long, so that makes it fast paced. And then the pacing of the book itself is fast paced, and you just want to keep learning more. One thing that I could think about that I dislike, it's just something that I thought of off the bat, are the characters are absolutely deplorable. They really are. I cannot like those characters, but at the same time, that's what makes me like it in a way because they're just so horrible that you just have so many questions for yourself. Like, why were these people born? Another thing I liked, I felt like the plot was something that I hadn't read before. I felt like it was different, and I felt like Colleen Hoover constructed it well. And yeah, when it came to disliking the book, I think, like I said before, the writing style was not my favorite, and the characters are just god awful. But besides that, I think overall, it's a solid thriller book. Fun fact, too, with that book, it has over 1 million reviews on Goodreads. That is super impressive. I don't know many books that even have like 100,000 or 200,000 reviews. Over 1 million is crazy. So my number two book, and we have two books left, which was episodes 3 and episodes 4. What do you think I'm going to choose? Which just was tough in a way. And I'm a little sad because my number two had to be The Drowning Woman by Robin Harding. And I know some people might have thought that was going to be my number one because I absolutely adore the author of The Drowning Woman. However, I couldn't let that completely take over my decision making. But I also will admit that I've read a couple of her other books, and every single book I've read of hers has been 5 stars. So she's an automatic read for me. Once again, this is a book that I read in 3 days, did not want to put this book down. It switches between two characters. The protagonist is homeless. I liked that the author, she did research. I like that the author did extensive research on really crafting that main character and understanding the point of view of someone being homeless without actually going through that experience themselves. And I felt like she did a great job at that. I think the characters that she created were solid. I think there was a lot of plot twists, and they were pretty good plot twists, some better than others. But I could definitely recall at least the plot twist, I want to say right in the middle of the book. Oh my God. Like my mouth dropped, definitely. I was like, oh no, why? I think one thing, if I had to say I disliked something about this book, which is hard to do, I don't want to do it. But if I had to choose one thing, I would say, and it's a criticism that I had seen other people talk about, and that is there's at least one twist, and I want to say it's the twist towards the end of the book that seems a little bit unbelievable. There's also another scene I can think of. I want to say this is halfway through the book where there's a lot of twist. I'm trying to think. There's probably like 5 or 6 twists at least or something. It's crazy, but it's great. It's good reading. Can I talk? I don't know. But there was a scene I remember reading where a character goes into this house, and to be honest, I felt like in the real world, they would have died. And that's the most I could say without really trying to give anything away. Actually, there's also something I just thought of. There's a scene in the beginning that I also didn't feel like was the most realistic. And essentially, it's, I feel like some sort of loan shark or gang leader, I feel like they would try to track you. And which just isn't really important in the book, but that doesn't end up happening. And that was another thing where I was thinking to myself, I don't know how realistic that is. But the pace of the book is great. The back and forth chapters, I felt like both characters had their own distinct voices. I felt like important themes were touched on. And yeah, I don't want to say anything else bad about the book. I do love that book so much. Now my number one pick had to go with None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. And I gotta just say, phenomenal job. This was the book out of all of them where I would make, and I'm a little ashamed to admit this, but I would make an excuse to go to the bathroom or say that, oh, I just had to lay down or something. And instead, I was actually reading this book because I did not want to stop reading this book. Has anyone done that before? They're at a social gathering or something, or maybe they're just doing something with someone and they say, oh, I'll be right back, and they might make up an excuse, and then in reality they're going to read a book. I don't is that bad? Because I've definitely done that a couple of times. Not often. Usually, my digestive system is not the best. So most of the time I am having some sort of issue there. But to be honest, I don't take naps often. So if I said that I have to take a nap, there's a possibility I was reading this book or reading a book. So things that I enjoyed about this book, loved the Netflix part of it, like the documentary style of it, loved the podcasting part of this book. I liked that it was interviews mixed in with actual plot. I know this is going to sound a little bit weird, but I liked how much it made me despise certain characters. I forgot to mention this with The Drowning Woman, but that book and this book, I felt like there was at least one or two characters that you could actually root for, that you would actually want to see better for them. One thing that I could say that I did not love about this book, and if you've listened to this episode, you're going to know, or you're going to have a good idea of what I'm thinking or what I'm about to say, and that is, oh wait, I can't give anything away. I'm trying not to have spoilers. Let's just say there's a character, well, there's two characters in this book, but there's definitely one character that I mention a lot that I don't like, that they painted them as a good guy when in reality I don't think they're a good guy, and that did bother me. So that would be one of my very few criticisms of this book, was how this person was painted as a good guy. And I think that's the most I could say without giving anything away. I just think morally it was hard to sit with that. But besides that, heavily enjoyed this book. If all these books were in a store, this would be the first book that I would pick up, which is None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. The Drowning Woman, I would also pick up by Robin Harding. Today's episode is sponsored by Zencastr. So, a few years ago, I started a podcast, and one of my podcasting friends told me they record through Zencastr. I guest starred on his show. It was super easy to join through the invite link. I just plugged in my microphone and we recorded. When I listened to the episode, the sound quality was chef's kiss. I knew going forward I had to use Zencastr to record episodes for my own show. It's now super easy to record a podcast with Zencastr. Log in using your browser and start recording a high quality podcast right away. Record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests. Feel a sense of zen knowing Zencastr's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable. If you have thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are over. With Zencastr's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast all in one place and distribute to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code FranksFiction, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all of my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story. So that is the book ranking part, where my least favorite to most favorite. Now I'm going to just go over some book recommendations that all of you out there had. There was two that came up a lot. And the reason for the book recommendations too is I'm interested to know what types of books, not only that some of you are reading, but that you would actually want to listen to on the podcast. And one thing that it told me is that I should cover more than just thriller books. Thriller is my favorite genre. I do like a few other genres as well, but that's the one I definitely gravitate towards the most. There's excitement, there's drama. I'm low-key guilty of loving drama and chaos and excitement. However, there were definitely some other genres that I noticed a lot of people were mentioning. The number one genre that a lot of readers I noticed tend to enjoy are fantasies. So I decided I may try to add some fantasies into season 2. It's not a genre that I read a lot, but I know it's a genre that would be quite interesting to discuss and talk about. I just know there might be so many details to talk about, because we're not just talking about potential real life situations that are fictional. We're talking about different worlds, magical lands, magical powers, dragons, just any sort of mythical beings mixed in, to the point where the possibilities are endless. But the two books that were heavily mentioned to me that they enjoyed or thought that I should cover, one of them was Britney Spears' memoir, The Woman in Me. Good news, I own that book, an audiobook version. Also good news, there is a 90-95% chance that book will be covered in season 2. So yay. I tend to cover and I tend to read a lot of fiction books. There are some memoirs I'd like to add, and potentially some other nonfictions, and that is definitely one that I would like to cover, because Britney Spears has been through so much. We've seen so much unfold, and it's just fascinating to learn even more wrongdoing that was going on, and just how hard this woman worked. And I'm so curious to know this woman's life more, and to be even more empathetic with, or at least sympathetic with, what she's gone through. And I truly do wish the best for her. Another book that everyone is telling me to get is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. At the time of this recording, Iron Flame is the second book of this series. I just also want to mention, so I don't know this author or anything, and I didn't even know what these books are about, which I'm about to read what Fourth Wing is about, but I'm hella impressed with how quickly she published these books. So Fourth Wing came out May of 2023. As I'm recording this is November 2023. Iron Flame just came out this month. Or actually just literally came out maybe a day or two ago. And that is extremely impressive to have two, and they're not short books. Two long fantasy books within a few months' time in 1 year. That is super impressive, and the amount of love and attention these books are getting on top of it is crazy. It's crazy good. So I heard so much about Fourth Wing, and I never read what it was about. I'm just gonna read a little, and I'm not reading the whole blurb on these books or anything, but just a little taste, so that if that what I tell you sounds interesting, maybe it's something you could add to your list as well, because these are all books that I'm going to be adding to my list. So Fourth Wing, they hint that it's suspenseful, sexy, and with incredibly entertaining storytelling. The first in Yarrow's Empyrean series will delight fans of romantic, adventure-filled fantasy. And it says, enter the brutal and elite world of a war college for dragon riders. That does sound very interesting. And I don't even read a lot of fantasy. And to me, I'm already ready to go get these books. I was at Barnes & Noble the other day, and with these books, they have these really cool, I don't know the exact name for it, but they're like black edged pages in the books. They almost look like they're scorched or something. I don't know if that's the point of it. Oh my God, I didn't think of that. That might actually be the point of it. But the books look really cool on the outside, and I hear the stories are great. But essentially, everyone is telling me to get these two books and to get them before I get food, which is a joke, of course. But I definitely added Fourth Wing. I would add both, but we're going to just start with Fourth Wing for now and kind of, give it a chance. I don't currently own that book, but I am thinking that might have to be a potential to cover on the podcast. And it is a much longer book than what I typically read, but I think it might be worth it. I'm just too damn curious to know what this book is about in full detail and just how good it actually is. So next we're going to go with a book that my girl Shannon recommended, which is called Love Redesigned by Lauren Asher. So this reminded me, so this is I'll just read what it is. Love Redesigned is a steamy small town romance about two family friends turned childhood rivals. It is the first book in the standalone Lakefront Billionaire series and has a happy ending. First of all, do not tell me what kind of ending a book has. I want to be surprised. I'm happy it didn't go into more detail. It looks like it changes from two points of view. At least the other parts of the blurb, it shows a man and a woman talking from their point of view. So I'm assuming it might go back and forth. But that also reminded me that I did not cover any romance novels. And I do like the romance genre. I know it's a genre that not a ton of my inner circle of readers read typically, but I think with romance it can either go really well or really bad, but really bad can be really funny. So I feel like these romance stories would be funny and interesting to talk about, which also reminds me, there's a book I read in the past that I'm highly considering covering on season 2, and I wasn't going to say it, but I think I'm going to just say it because not everyone's going to listen to this episode, let's be honest. I think I'm going to do Call Me By Your Name by Andre Aciman. When people ask me what my favorite book is, that is the book I say. So there's a good chance I might want to revisit that book. I might reread it, or I might just go based off of my memory of the book. I've only seen the movie about 6 or 7 times. I'm shocked I haven't reread the book more, but some of the most beautiful prose I've ever read in my entire life is in that book. But I also warn people that that book is sort of an acquired taste, that just because I love it does not mean you will love it. I have found people that absolutely hate it. The best way I could put it is that book is sort of like caviar in a way. Like some people love caviar and some people do not. And I just feel like that is the type of book it is. And fortunately for me, I love it. So that is potentially going to be another book that I cover within season 2. And I'm most likely going to cover more books in season 2 than I did this season. I technically only did 4. You could count Verity as 5, but technically I did 4. Where I'm thinking for season 2, I may cover 12 books. So a lot more entertainment for you guys. I'm so excited. But yes, Love Redesigned by Lauren Asher. The only thing is, I think that just said it's the first book, so it's going to be a series. I don't know if the other book is out yet, but sometimes series, I think Fourth Wing obviously is a series too. I just got to be careful with those because series will just make me really broke. I'm going to end up buying all the books and it's just so tough. There's so many damn books out there. So this next book that was recommended to me by Gabrielle, I actually had this book already on my list, so when I saw it, I'm like, okay, like that is a book I do want to read and I potentially would want to cover, and I think it would match, or it would mesh well with this podcast. So it's called All the Dangerous Things by Stacy Willingham. Did I write that correctly? Yes. Okay. Stacy Willingham. So this book is a thriller, and a little quick take on the book is, since her son went missing, Isabel Drake can't sleep. After reading this thriller, you might not be able to either. And some things that it mentions about this book is nonlinear timeline, unreliable narrator. I love unreliable narrators, and when they're in thrillers, it's even better. Some puzzle aspect to it, and mama drama. I think one thing that really attracted me to wanting to read this book when I originally saw it. So I originally saw this book on Book of the Month. I didn't end up getting it for Book of the Month. I may have paused my membership at this point, but I started adding some of those books onto my Amazon wish list, which people could gift me if they want. They do not have to, it's not required. I'm just saying I have a list and I have a lot of books on it. And you don't have to get me a book, but if you did, it would make me happy. But no, seriously, I own so many books that it's okay if you don't, I promise. But what attracted me with this is that as this mother is trying to find her son, she agrees to be interviewed on a true crime podcast, which to me, oh, like I don't think I've read something like that. And knowing that potentially she's an unreliable narrator, I'm really excited to figure out where the hell this boy is. And for people that like true crime, obviously this would be an episode to tune into. Oh, so the next book. So this book that was recommended to me, never heard of it before. My friend Allie recommended it to me. And this book, when she described, I didn't even fully read the blurb, but when she said this book was like this, I knew I had to read it. And it's on my list now. It is called Fantastic Land. Man, I wish I wrote better. What I mean by that is my handwriting is difficult to read, and I want to say people, and it's always when it's the author's name, Mike Mike Bachoven. Mike Bachoven? It looks like it's Bach oven. I want to say people's names right, and I swear my writing is eligible except for the author's name, and it's like the last name because that happened with Stacy's last name, where my handwriting is just complete ass. So I apologize for that, but it is called Fantastic Land. And Allie described this book as Lord of the Flies meets Hunger Games meets Disney World. Sign me up right now. That is definitely an episode that if I owned that book, I would be covering on here. But I guess the book, it takes place at an amusement park, and it said something about like the 1970s. Children end up killing each other here at this amusement park. Like it becomes abandoned or something. It just, and that's where like the whole Lord of the Flies and Hunger Games kind of comes into play, that aspect. And I want to know more. I want to know more. And it's not a super long book either. So it'd probably be something to get through quickly. It mentioned too that there's some interview style passages throughout the book as well, and that I'm all for that. As it shows, when none of this is true, I'm all for that. Another book that was mentioned to me. So this one's a fantasy. Like I said, there was many fantasy books that were recommended to me. This was recommended by Michael E. It's called Swordcatcher by Cassandra Clare, who I know her from the Mortal Instruments series. So I say I know her for that series, but I just have to give a short backstory. So I have a friend named Steph, and I owned the Mortal Instruments series. I let her borrow the books, but I never actually read the books myself. I did get the books back, by the way. I'm not saying she stole the books, but she read them, liked them. I never read them and got rid of them. I don't know what's wrong with me. This was years and years ago where I just was trying to love reading, and I just couldn't really find that love again. But I was reading I think I was reading a lot of manga in high school, but it was hard for me to truly get into novels like I am today. So, a little bit about Swordcatcher. Two outcasts find themselves caught in a web of forbidden love, dangerous magic, and dark secrets that could change the world forever in the start of a riveting epic fantasy series from the author of the Shadowhunter Chronicles. I forgot she did that series too, and I heard that's a good series. She's really good at writing series. I think this one is a standalone book. I could be wrong though. This might be another series, which I wouldn't be surprised because apparently she's really good at writing them, because I heard that was a good series. The Mortal Instrument series I heard was good. So I definitely know this woman is most likely a good writer. And yeah, that's something that I have to add to my list. And my friend Michael said that that was a really good book and that he loved it. So I have two more recommendations here. This one might be familiar sounding to some readers. It might be familiar sounding to some people who have a Netflix account. This book was recommended by Ashley W. All the Lights We Cannot See by Anthony. Wow, I did it again. I wrote the last name wrong, so I crossed it out, and it looks like a bunch of little like Skittle doodles. I don't know what that means, but it squiggly bits. What is this? What's wrong with me? All the Lights We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. Doerr is what I think I wrote. I apologize so much. I I'm barely functioning at this point. But All the Lights That We Cannot See, I saw this everywhere at Barnes & Noble at one point, but now it is a Netflix limited series. So this might be one that I might have to check out the book and then watch the series, which is always so much fun. Also, speaking of, that might be another potential bonus content type of stuff. Maybe some movies versus books, because we know there's so many. We know some of the best movies out there are based off of books. Am I right? I know I'm right. So this book, what I found extremely impressive is that it is the winner of a Pulitzer Prize and National Book Award finalist. That's amazing. Apparently, it's about a blind French girl and a German boy whose paths collide in occupied France as both try to survive the devastation of World War II. I know one of my best friends loves World War II books, or like World War II related books. I know there's a lot of people that are fascinated with that topic. I have a little bit of fascination myself. Now, am I the biggest historical fiction fan? No. But if I had to say one author that writes historical fiction that I enjoy, I would say Kristen Hanna. I heard does a great job, and I've read one or two of her books. But I know there's probably a lot of fantastic historical fiction writers. It's just not my genre typically. So I don't know if I will. I don't know when I'll get to this book, if I get to this book, because I feel like trying to retell this book and have opinions on it. I mean, I'm just going to be honest. Like, let me be frank here. History was one of my least favorite courses in school because I'm thinking history's in the past. I don't want to think about the past. I get stuck on the past as it is in life. And sometimes some of the history was just very boring, to me at least. I know history, some people love history. I was one of those weirdos that loves math. I know. We already established there's things that are wrong with me, but English and math were more the things that I liked more than like science and history, especially history. But yeah, this is a book that I am debating because I've heard so many good things, and for it to win a Pulitzer Prize, it's just extremely impressive. I don't know what else to say besides that. Like, that's an amazing accomplishment. And the last book that I'm going to go over was recommended by Manny M, and it is You'd Be Home Now by Kathleen Glasgow. I did it again. Yo, I kind of did it again. This one's a little bit easier to read. I think it's Glasgow because that name is familiar to me, and I think that's the only reason. Did I write it properly? No. Now, this book is a young adult book, but it's a young adult book that touches on a more serious topic. So, this is the author that also wrote Girl in Pieces. And it says, in this raw, deeply personal story, a teenage girl struggles to find herself amidst the fallout of her brother's addiction in a town ravaged by the opioid crisis. So, first off, definitely a tough subject. That could definitely be an interesting discussion for sure. I also didn't think about covering young adults on this podcast, young adult novels. I tend not to receive a ton of suggestions whenever I ask book recommendations. Young adult doesn't come up as much as thriller or fantasy or even romance. But I think to add a couple here and there, I think would work. I mean, for example, Heartstopper, it's a young adult graphic novel. Love those books so much. That's also on Netflix. I highly recommend you check out Heartstopper. She's actually coming out with the 5th book soon, and they're working on the 3rd season. Super excited. That's something I love too. I loved watching it alone when I was single at the time, and now I have a boyfriend to watch it with, and it's just even more adorable. But yeah, that is another book that I am potentially going to add to my list, my very long list of books that I need to read. So that is all the book recommendations that I'm going to do for now. I want to thank all of you so much for listening to the show. Before I forget, we have a little bit of a ranking update about where this podcast is going. So so if you're in the Philippines or in Canada, thank you for listening to this podcast and sharing it with people, because I'm almost top 100 in book podcast in the Philippines and in Canada. So thank you for that. US, where are you? Where are you? We need to move this up. I know maybe there's more competition, but we need some more listeners there. Come on, people. No, I'm just kidding though. I do appreciate all of you for checking out the show. Like I said earlier in the episode, it's becoming so much fun to do this show, and I'm really excited to potentially bring on other bookstagrammers, other readers who I can talk about these books with and have some riveting conversations. So once this episode is out, I'm going to be working on season 2. I don't know when I'll be back, but I will make some social media announcements. I might make an announcement on here as well. I might make like a couple minute clip or something. So if you're following the show, which make sure you're following the show on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, I'm on Amazon Music, I'm on Audible. We're we're on a lot of different platforms. Google Podcasts, I just remembered. I might even be on iHeartRadio and Pandora as well. So Frank's Fiction it's going places, and I'm so excited about that. I also want to add that if you are a Spotify listener, so I use Zencaster to record my episodes, and I do hosting through Spotify for podcasters. So when people listen on Spotify, that pushes me a lot closer to more monetization opportunities and to get more money and to earn more money for the show. If you listen on Apple Podcasts or any other platforms, that still helps as well. But for some reason, there's a really tight integration between my hosting platform and Spotify. This used to be called Anchor. They rebranded. I think Spotify, whoever owns Spotify, bought Anchor out. So there is a huge integration there now. And I noticed whenever there are listeners or people who comment on the Spotify stuff and rate it there, that really moves the podcast up in success. So if you do have like a Spotify premium account or you do use Spotify in general, I definitely recommend listening to it there. Who knows? Maybe in the future, there could be video with this podcast and you would be able to see it on Spotify. So that might be something. However, if you do listen on any of the other platforms, I still love you so much for that. And I'm not discrediting that at all. But I just wanted to let all of you know that if I'm sharing the Spotify link more than the others, that's why. Because it for some reason, it helps me out more. So I wanted to be transparent on that. But yes, please follow the show. Please follow me on social media. Please leave ratings and reviews. Those help a lot. Whether you love the show or you hate the show, definitely let me know what you like. If you have any constructive criticism, I'm open to that too. But to close off for now, I want to wish all of you a super special, awesome day and take care until season 2. Bye.